Hi, I'm Alex. This is Project Brimstone, our capstone project for Rogue Games. We developed a roguelike game focused on player skill and creativity in Unity. This game has various different rooms for you to adapt to and fight your way through, and once you defeat all the enemies, you can go back to the torch and complete the game.
Hey there, I'm James, part of the Rogue Games Capstone group, and today I'll be helping present Project Brimstone, a game we've made entirely within Unity using C#.
Hello, I'm Logan Corley from Rogue Games. I worked on the combat system for Project Brimstone, and I'll be talking about the technologies we use to make the game.
Hey, I'm Lucas McClaremark.
Hi, I'm Mark McCoy.
So, when looking at our experience playing video games, our team found there were a few different problems with how modern games have been made. First off, some games just take way too much time to play. You can't play them in between classes or for a few minutes after a job, and it just takes too much time to try and schedule them. Secondly, some games are just too complex. A lot of valuable time is spent online checking guides instead of actually playing it. And finally, some games are too simple. They provide a boring experience, and there's just not that much for a player to do. So, looking at this problem, our team kind of analyzed these in more detail. So the first one about games taking too much time. This can really cut into an experience. Sometimes the games don't have nice discrete sections where a player can stop and experience. And when a distraction comes up, the player has to cut off the entire playtime and attend to whatever came up. Then, if they do get more time, they need to remember exactly what was happening. Sometimes this happens in games like Cyberpunk 2077, where you have a lot of complex things going on, and when you get to it, you have to try and remember what was happening. The second problem is that some games are just too hard to understand. Sometimes their mechanics are way too deep, and you have to spend a lot of time looking up online guides instead of actually playing the game. At that point, half of the experience of the game just becomes Google searching, and that's not a lot of fun when you could be, adventuring through a new land in a game or something like that. And some games like this are games like The Binding of Isaac, where you spend a lot of time looking up items instead of actually playing the game. And finally, some games are just too simple. Rather than providing an interesting experience, the user just does the same thing over and over again. It starts to become a chore to play instead of a fun challenge. Some of these games just don't really make the player think about what they need to do, and it's just repetitive. Examples of this type of game include something like Cookie Clicker, where the player just simply clicks on a button over and over and over and over, and there's not that much that changes.
In the same vein of the simplicity of some of those games, many fall into the trap of having the experience be identical on each playthrough. In those games, it often can be wonderful the first time you win, but after that, the players long to experience that first playthrough again. By having our dungeon auto-generate each time the player loads it up, and having different enemies in each room, we're able to make it a different game each time, so the user can continue to play this game over and over, even after beating the game for the first time. So in conclusion, our game aims to hit a niche of games that don't require a large time investment up front just to familiarize yourself with the controls. This allows for people to have a friend come try a run, or just to share the game with somebody who may never have played a game of this style. We also aim to help those out that just want to load up a game for the first time and know what their objective is. We don't want players out there having to Google where to go or feel like they have to work just to play the game. And even still, we want there to be levels to this game for those that may want to see how quickly they could beat it, or those that want to challenge themselves with some limits. This could be something such as playing with just the bow or just with the sword. By allowing small features such as the fallen angels being able to shoot the imps, dedicated players will be able to use that knowledge that they've gained without it seeming like a disadvantage to the new players. Through this, it gives a sense of mastery to those players that have spent a lot of time noticing all the small features of the game. Lastly, by the nature of this random generation, playing it multiple times should increase your enjoyment as you feel yourself getting better without making players feel as though they're just retracing their steps. In essence, we made this game not to astound someone with fully immersive play, but to give them a break from mentally taxing work and give a fun but slightly challenging game to share with a friend or maybe compete with your past self to improve.
To build Project Brimstone, we decided to use the Unity game engine. We made this decision since we wanted to get started prototyping quickly, have faster turnaround times for implementing new features, and easily support multiple platforms. Had we made our own engine, we would have needed to implement several core systems that Unity already has, such as graphics, input handling, resource management, file I/O, and much more. Moreover, having team members working on different operating systems means we would have had to port over a lot of platform-specific code in the beginning just to get started developing. Since all this upfront work would have taken too much time, we decided to use Unity instead. Unity uses C# as a scripting language for interfacing with the game engine. C# is part of Microsoft's .NET Framework Initiative, a framework designed to allow a common intermediate language to run in a lightweight VM called the Common Language Runtime, or CLR. This allows .NET languages to easily work with each other since they are compiled to the Common Intermediate Language, but the framework also has interoperability services for calling unmanaged code, such as external binaries compiled from C. This is why C# or any .NET language is a good pick for a scripting language. Unity uses a lightly modified version of Mono to achieve this scripting interface. Mono is just an open source cross-platform implementation of the .NET framework. This lends to Unity's ease of porting when it comes to building the game and platform independence for running the Unity editor itself. In addition to this, Unity uses a just-in-time compiler for both the editor and the runtime, which means compilation is platform independent and allows live reloading code while using the editor. With all these benefits of the technology we used come some downsides as well. We had several issues throughout development with Unity, specifically errors coming from small differences in editor versions, or issues with the interface having glitches after someone made a change to the project. In addition to this, we had to set up Git to work with Unity's files and our Git attributes and gitignore, which allows us to upload large binary files and ignore some other unneeded files. We still ran into merge issues, however, when we had conflicts with Unity scene files or prefab files, which don't lend themselves to being easily resolved, as is the case with pure code files. Having a custom engine means we would have worked mostly with code files and maybe some simple binary ones, which would have been easier to organize. Finally, it is well known that running code on a VM like the CLR is always going to be slower than running native code. Since our game is very simple in terms of engine requirements, we may have been able to get away with writing our own engine for the benefit of speed, size, and perhaps game code simplicity at the cost of startup and iteration time.
Hi, welcome to Project Brimstone, a roguelike where you play as an alchemist trying to escape from the 7th layer of hell. As you can see, this is our main menu. We have 4 separate options. Play, which will take you into a new game. Notebook, which will take you to our notebook section. Options, which will take you to our options menu. And Quit, which will close the application.
First, let's dive into our options menu. In our options menu, you can access all of the game settings, such as the volume, accessed via master, background music, and sound effects sliders, the screen resolution, which is a drop-down menu which will take all of your available resolutions on your computer and let you swap between them at will. For the sake of the demo, I will go down to 3840 by 2160, and a full screen toggle, which will toggle between full screen and windowed modes. Now, the notebook, where you can see all of the crafting recipes that we have in the game so far. So we have the arrow, the bow, and the sword, which will show a picture of the item alongside their crafting recipe. Like the bow requires 1 wood and 2 stone, and the sword requires 2 stone. Close the notebook. And now, let's start a new game. 1.
Welcome to your new game of Brimstone. As you can see here, we have the controls listed, which we'll go through right now. WASD will move you around. Left click will attack/navigate your menus. Aim is done with the mouse. Right click will swap your weapons. Q is interact. R will restart your game. And I will access the inventory. These can be accessed through the pause menu by pressing escape.
Here, we have our player health, noted by some full red hearts. Starts at 5, and then every time the player takes damage, it'll drop until it hits 0. Down here, we have our inventory hotbar, alongside by pressing I, our inventory menu. This is where our enemy drops and crafted items will go, alongside the crafting tab, which will allow us to craft weapons to renew our durability. Next, let's go over to the pause menu. We have resume, options, main menu, and quit game. They all do about what you'd expect, but let's dive into the options. It's been modified a bit for in-game use, but still the same as before. We've got our screen resolution, full screen, even volume sliders, and some crafting information over here to the left, and our controls to the right. Now, we can get back into the game.
Each level consists of 7 randomly generated rooms. Each room will spawn new enemies the player has to kill, and will remain locked until the room is cleared. The starting room will not generate enemies, and the player will return there after clearing all the rooms. There are 2 types of enemies: the imps, who are the red demons that rush the player, and the fallen, who are the larger demons who will shoot at the player from afar. Meanwhile, the player has 2 ways to combat the enemies: the sword and the bow. The sword is a melee weapon for close attack, while the bow is a ranged weapon that can attack from a distance.
Next, we can go over the crafting system, but first I'll need a broken weapon. Let's see how many hits it'll take. There we go. You'll know your weapon is broken when it's colored in red. We can pull up the crafting menu with I, and we can see we already have some items from when we defeated the enemies. Enemies will drop items such as potions, stones, and wood for the player to use in crafting, but you can also spawn them in your inventory in this build by pressing X. Now we've got some materials. We can drag potions over to our hotbar, use them by clicking. Meanwhile, we can craft by making sure we have the items in our inventory and then clicking the crafting tab. We can select a crafting recipe from one of the icons, as long as we have the materials needed, and give it a click. When you click it, it'll use the materials in your inventory and refresh your item.
Starting with a fresh game here. As stated before, when a player loses their health, the death screen will appear, prompting them to restart with R.
And there it goes.
We have taken the liberty to clear most of the rooms in this level to show how the player wins. After clearing the rooms of the enemies, the player will need to return to the starting room, where a torch can be interacted with, and the player will have won the game. This concludes our demo. Thank you for watching.